Can you tell us a bit about your experience at the assessment centre at your firm and the types of tasks that you had to undertake? Jake, can I start with you on that one?
Yeah, sure. So we started nice and easy, an icebreaker. It was just something light-hearted to get to know people. We had to represent the firm's values through Lego, so that was quite fun. It was then on to the presentation task. It was an individual presentation, client-based, a real estate scenario. We'd had 2 weeks to prepare for it. It was a 20-minute presentation, 10 of which was presenting and 10 of which was answering questions. So I had to do some research, structure an answer, and it was difficult to be well prepared because if you're well prepared, then you can limit the questions that they ask. And that's what I found was best in my presentation. But after that, it was the interview. This was about an hour. It was on the firm's values and what they're looking for in an apprentice. And they also asked situational questions. One of the questions was something along the lines of, if you were behind on a deadline, how would you organize yourself to make sure that you hit it? And someone answered it, I wouldn't be behind on a deadline. That's not a good way to answer it. So please engage with the situation. Put yourself in that scenario because they're testing you for qualities. You also want to think, why that firm? You need specific information on it. If you can say your answer without saying the firm's name and they can still tell you're talking about that firm, that shows that you've got a good level of detail. And then after that, there was a written task. This was about 45 minutes to test analytical and written skills. It was drafting a letter in response to a client scenario.
Yep. So I would say one of the first things that I realized I need to think about a bit more was actually working on how I show my passion for the firm. That is a lot easier said than done. I found that whenever I was reading things online, I thought they were incredibly interesting and exciting, but I knew that I had to present that in a way that was actually authentic. And I soon realized that the best way for me to do that is by actually doing effective research on the firm. A key point there is your research on the firm should be a continuous process. I speak to a lot of other aspiring apprentices and they perceive research as a tick box exercise, something they'll do like an hour before submitting their application, and they'll then reuse the same research for the whole application process. Please don't do that. I'd recommend actually having a document for each of the firms that you're applying to. And then every time you come across something interesting, whether that's a deal on Little Law or something on LinkedIn, put it in the document. I did that and I found that over time it meant that I could develop a really solid understanding of what the firm's doing and its approach to particular areas of law. For freshwater, for example, we've also got a news and insight section on our website that you're able to filter through by practice area. So you are able to find matches or transactions that are aligned with your interests. And this is going to be a bit of a shameless plug here. Apologize to those of you that have attended other freshwater events because you'll be sick of me recommending this. But I would also really recommend each of you subscribe to the Fresh Perspectives newsletter on LinkedIn. It's a really good way of keeping up with what's going on in the firm, as well as wider issues and industry developments. Then, when you're actually in the interview, don't be afraid to use that research to show what interests you. In my Freshfields Assessment Centre, for example, I ended up having a debate with the partner about a particular aspect of the firm's international strategy. That made me stand out because it showed I actually care about this work and that I have opinions on it. And then in my assessment center for another firm, in the interview, I mentioned something so niche about a tech initiative that the firm had worked on that neither of the partners interviewing me had heard of it. But again, that's what kind of made me memorable. And then I would say a second challenge was actually just preparing for the written task because they are fundamentally different to your GCSE or A-level exam questions in that those tasks are not really designed to test your ability to memorize information. Instead, they're testing how you can absorb information, break it down, and then communicate that in a really succinct manner under time pressure because those assessments are timed. And even in the written task, there's a lot of variation in what some firms might give you. Some might use a proofreading exercise where you have to spot spelling mistakes or clarity issues. Others, which I saw a lot often based on my own experiences, give you a dense bundle of information and they'll then ask you to summarize specific points of information or answers targeted to specific questions. Going to my first assessment center, of course, I had no idea what to expect whatsoever. But then once I had actually done one, I knew how I could prepare for the future ones. So I practiced reading really dense articles from the BBC or the Financial Times on a wide range of topics like scientific and political stories. And I read those articles for no more than 3 minutes at a time. And I would then immediately bullet point every single thing I could remember, just because that allows you to improve your ability to break down information and also to separate what's important from what isn't, just because a lot of the time there is a lot of background information and it's your job to split what's useful and what isn't. And then just one final tip there is sometimes when you're in the written task, you're not able to understand where exactly you need to start. So I found using a framework like the PESTLE framework really helpful. So if you're thinking about things from a political, an economic, a social, a technological, a legal, and an environmental perspective, you immediately have a structured way to approach almost any business problem they give you in the written task. So you know exactly where to start, and that way you can make an effective use of your limited time as well.
Annabelle, if I come to you first on that, before I come to Kevin, I know that for myself last year and for this year, assessment centres really do feel like the pinnacle of an application process. And it feels really like the make or break. What is it firms are actually looking to do here, and how do they use those assessment centres to whittle down the final few candidates to those that they'll make offers to?
Yeah, I think everyone who attends an assessment centre should bear in mind that already to be invited, you've shown on paper that you have all the requirements the firm are looking for. We get a lot of applications, and it's a huge cut down. So to make it to the assessment day is a huge achievement in itself. And then I think it's really just about the kind of preparation. So in terms of what we're looking for, we have key skills that we're recruiting for. So we are looking, but at the end of the day, we are looking for potential. We're not expecting someone to come in and have all the technical knowledge and kind of know everything. It is really a kind of potential that we're aiming to look for. So in terms of skills, we're looking for transferable skills. So teamwork, communication, attention to detail, good time management. And these are all things that people can demonstrate in different ways depending on their own experience. But I would really recommend, especially for the kind of interview part of the day, I would expect most firms are going to be asking some sort of kind of competency, motivational questions, and you can prepare in advance for them. And with that, it's really the balance between you want to prepare, but you also want it to sound, natural and engaging. If you kind of read out a scripted answer that you've memorized, it's not going to land in the same way. So my advice would really be to, more think about bullet points and like practice the delivery of those answers as well. As Kevin said, we are not trying to catch you out. The point of this is to put people, in an opportunity where they can speak to the firm, find out more, and hopefully, they can be given a good opportunity to really show what they can do and who they are as an individual. As I said, on paper, kind of everyone at that point, we think everyone would be a great candidate. So at that point, it's really about seeing who we think would be the best fit for Wedlake Bell and who would kind of make the most of our apprenticeship program. One thing I think that's really important is genuinely enthusiasm. Sounds a bit, basic almost. Obviously, everyone's enthusiastic, they're all applying, but it's a 6-year program. We need people to be enthusiastic, excited, and committed to seeing the program through start to finish. So I think being enthusiastic and showing that you are committed to the program and committed to completing the full 6 years, is a really important thing to get across. And unfortunately, when someone's nervous, I think that can hinder enthusiasm. So it's a really, important, I think, to try and harness any nerves and really kind of channel them into enthusiasm, into excitement. It's a fine line between those two emotions, I think. But yeah. I would say as well, all of the different areas that I mentioned in the assessment day, they're all important, they're all taken into consideration. So, as make sure that you're kind of putting as much into the group exercise as you are the interview. And that's why we have, it's quite a lot of assessments to do on one day, but we find it really helpful because it is so competitive that having feedback from all the areas is really important. We will also provide feedback to everyone that attends the assessment day as well. So even if you are unsuccessful, it can still give you really hopefully useful kind of feedback and help as you prepare for other assessment days as well. And yeah, I think that's probably my top tips from our process.
That's excellent. Thank you, Annabelle. If I come to you on that, Kevin.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, what I would say is that none of this is secret. So everyone is very open and honest about what they are looking for. And if you do your research, you can find exactly these answers on an individual firm basis. So it's things like the webinars Annabelle mentioned earlier. Slaughter may do in-person events that everyone is invited to before the interview days, and there you can get a feel for it. You can understand exactly what people want, and that's the thing to do. This is all we are taking time out of our day with some very clever people. We go to those assessment centers or the interviews because we want to give you a job. And that's the thing to bear in mind when you approach all of this. We're looking for things. It's not secret. It's not an episode of The Traitors. We're not trying to trip anyone up. We are very open on our website, and all the firms present here today are very open on their website of exactly what they're looking for. So if you have a look at that before the day, you can think really how you will demonstrate that on the day. For us, our categories are so we look at intellect. So, are you kind of clever enough to do the job? It can be a very intellectual job. Again, if you're already at the kind of interview stage, then you have already got everything on paper and you need to be confident in that. But it's not just school grades, it's also things like in an interview scenario, in a discussion, can you hold your own? Can you think quickly on your feet? If you say something and the partner at a law firm disagrees with you, can you process that, or are you going to quickly say, okay, yeah, of course, no, I agree with you, or can you stand up for yourself? It's drive. So do you want to do the job? As Annabelle said, it's a 6 year program. And when I think back to myself when I was 18, and I've discussed this with Paul before actually, I could not have said what I was going to do in 6 years' time. So it's incredibly impressive that people can do that as solicitor apprentices and showing us that you've got that drive, you're really enthusiastic about it, that you're really excited about it is really good. A genuine interest in commercial law. The job we do, I think it's the best job in the world. If you don't like the job, if you're not genuinely interested in it, it could probably be the worst job in the world. So making sure you genuinely want to do it, everything Ube was talking about earlier, the things you find interesting about the job and demonstrating that. Interpersonal skills, so can you have a conversation? You've got to bear in mind that ultimately you would be a trainee at Slaughter and May, and so it's very likely you'll sit in an office with me for 6 months. I don't want a corporate robot. I don't want a corporate drone. I want someone I can have a nice conversation with. I want someone with a genuine personality. So, that's just be yourself as much as you can. It's a really tricky thing to say because it's obviously a really nerve-wracking day, but don't present the person you think we want to see. Bring yourself to the interview because we want to see you, and we want to see your personality and your interpersonal skills. And then independence of thought. Again, just can you think on your feet? When we're in a conversation, can you stand up for yourself? Everything Obey was saying about earlier, if you disagree with someone, can you do that in a respectful way but hold your own? Can you adapt your position, etc.? So again, I mean, our interviews are very conversational, but that's what ultimately we're looking for. That's a lot of words basically to say. I think what we're looking for really is that someone's genuinely interested and someone is genuinely interested in.
Thank you. That's great, Kevin. If I come back to you both on that and sort of say, have you got any top tips that go beyond those qualities that you look for? Some smaller little top tips to make those really, really strong first impressions when you walk through the door on your assessment day. If I come back to you on that first, Kevin.
Yeah. So I mean, so our assessment day would be the interview day, and I think in an interview, honestly, my top tip is just to pause. So you will be having people will be asking you questions, and if you're anything like me, it's really tempting to answer the questions really straight away, fire back straight away, and as you're talking, you sort of hear yourself and you think, "Oh God, I don't think I meant to say that," or you don't quite make yourself pause. Say, "Oh, thanks, Finn. That's a really good question," and pause and have a think. Have a sip of water. Take your time. You don't need to answer the question straight off the bat. We're not expecting you to come back with a perfect answer straight away. You can pause. You can say, look, yeah, thanks, Finn. I hadn't thought about it that way. It's a really interesting counterpoint and just holding your own. And it's the same if we look, there will be parts of the interview where we might intentionally start an argument. So we might be talking about a newspaper article and we'll say, look, Finn, what's your view on that? And you'll give us your view, and I'll say, Funnily enough, as it happens, I disagree and I take the complete opposite view. We're not there. We don't want you then to say, oh, yes, sorry, yes, I completely agree. That's not what we're going for. We want you to be respectful, as Ube was saying earlier, but be able to hold your own. So again, it's having those little phrases prepared that can give you that bit of time or can push back internally. And you can think of that all through the day. So, how will I buy a bit of time if I need to? If I find I've said the wrong thing, what is the phrase I'll use to slightly backtrack myself or apologize? And there's lots of phrases out there. Lawyers use these phrases all the time in their day-to-day jobs to buy a bit of time. It's completely fine for you to do the same in an interview. So just think about how you present yourself.
How do you think it's best to compose yourself in that professional setting? And how did you prepare for it, and how did you cope with it on the day? Can I come to you first, Jake, on that one?
Yeah, I think in the interview, it's very much, as Kevin said, take a pause, take a breath. Everyone's really understanding of what you're doing. It's a very big decision to make at 18 years old, very high pressured scenario. If you just take a moment and say, can I just have a breather? They're going to respect that more than you just kind of mumbling out an answer that maybe isn't as good.
One of our attendees says, thank you for the advice, Ube. You mentioned the pesto structure, which sounds really helpful. Could you just explain a little bit more about the anagram and how we could apply that? Thank you in advance.
Yeah, so it's the PESTLE framework. So P starting with political, E starting for economic, S standing for social, T standing for technological, L standing for legal, and E standing for ethical, and or environmental, whichever one I got wrong the other way around for E. But essentially, it's just going through each and every single one of those and actually deciding how does this come into play. So, for example, if you're thinking about things from an environmental perspective, you can think about things like carbon dioxide emissions. You can think about how certain supply chains work. It's just a really good foundation for you to have. You don't necessarily have to go through things in that specific order. The whole point of it is just so whenever you do have that mind blank or where you don't actually have a starting point, you just have those few factors you can think about, and you will immediately be able to think of something along those lines. So you will be able to start somewhere, and then from that you can just build on those foundations and really develop on them further.
If I come to you again, Kevin, on this one, it often feels hard to get the balance right in a group setting between dominating and then also being too quiet and introverted. How do you think you get that balance right when you're in a social setting of the assessment centre?
So we don't have a group exercise component at Slaughter and May, so worth discussing with some of the people that have got that. But I mean, look, it is a tricky thing. It is an intentionally tricky thing. That is why it will be part of the assessment centres. Really, it is about that difficult balance between holding your own and being confident. So what Jake was saying earlier about making sure that you're robust. If you have a view, express it. That is why you are there. You have passed a threshold. You've got everything we're looking for on paper. So if you've got a view, we want to hear your view. At the same time, you should absolutely be polite and courteous to everyone around you. And this is honestly what I do on a day-to-day basis as a job, right? When we're negotiating a contract with Freshfields, when we're talking to our clients, etc., we have to be firm, we have to be robust. We're negotiating a position, but we have to be professional, and that's what we're looking for in the day. That you've got those foundations between. So be confident, realize you are there for a reason, and be polite, but hold your own.
That's great. Thank you. What about you, Annabelle? How do you think you can stand out and get that balance right in a group setting?
Yeah, I think it's important to make sure that, at all times you're being polite, don't speak over people. If you both kind of talk at the same time, invite the other person to speak. There's plenty of time for everyone to kind of give their opinion. Our group exercise is not kind of, I know some firms have it as like a negotiation between two groups, which obviously is going to be a little bit more, you're going to be disagreeing on points, etc. Ours is more of a group together, all trying to find a solution. So whilst people might have different ideas that need to be discussed, it shouldn't really be too punchy, I'd say. But I think just make sure that you're, giving your opinion, you're kind of giving your input, but at the same time, it can be really good to be seen to also kind of invite other people to speak, bring others into the conversation. It can help as well, when there's a group and if everyone's trying to be polite and let everyone speak, it's good to kind of keep an eye on the structure, making sure that everyone, the group is kind of moving along and getting through the points. In ours as well, there's a presentation at the end. So it's also important that the group make sure, that they're taking enough time to prepare for the actual presentation as well as all of the discussion. So, and not necessarily, you don't need to be the timekeeper and kind of be reminding someone of, every kind of minute. But it can be good to, help be that person that kind of moves the group along and make sure that you are actually going to get to an outcome. And yeah, also I think make sure you read the instructions carefully, read the documents. So we give some set time for everyone to kind of quietly sit there and read through everything, and then there's discussion time. So it's a good opportunity to kind of bring forward the points that you found as well.